She thought silence would keep her safe. But sometimes, the quietest girl in the room says the one sentence that burns the whole house down. The Halcyon was the kind of restaurant where power came dressed in linen. Golden chandeliers dripped light over glassware polished to invisibility. Laughter was soft, expensive, the kind that said, "I own something you don't." And in the center of it all, waiters glided like shadows trained never to exist. Emily Carter had worked here 6 months and still felt like she was trespassing in someone else's dream. At 23, she was the invisible kind, soft-spoken, quick-handed, good at vanishing when people's tempers rose. The perfect waitress, they said, the kind who doesn't make noise. That night at table 7, Senator Whitfield's credit card gleamed under the low amber light. Emily slid the receipt from the printer, smiled, and froze. The total was wrong, by exactly $312. She double-checked, tracing each line item. One wine bottle replaced with another. Barolo Reserva 2012 instead of House Merlot. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Someone had edited the order after she'd processed it. Her stomach tightened. Greg Torres, the floor manager, the man whose cologne filled every inch of air he entered. He was leaning against the service station now, smirking, arms folded across his white shirt that strained slightly at the buttons. "Problem, sweetheart?" he asked, voice dripping fake concern. Emily swallowed. "The wine," she said quietly. "They ordered the House Merlot. This says Barolo Reserva. That's a $300 difference." Greg's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You questioning my management?" "No." "Sir, I'm questioning the bill." The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Too sharp, too honest. They hung in the air like a match about to drop into gasoline. Greg's expression hardened. "You calling me a thief?" "I'm saying, you're saying too much." He stepped forward, lowering his voice to a hiss. "We don't need attitude from servers, Emily. You want to keep your job, you process the damn payment." Her pulse drummed in her throat. "That's theft, sir." Silence. Then the sound of a glass clinking somewhere, distant and cruelly normal. Greg's hand shot out, gripping her upper arm. His fingers dug through the sleeve of her white uniform. "You're done for tonight," he whispered. "Actually, maybe done. Period. Let's have a little talk in the back. Somewhere private." The hallway behind the bar was narrow, lined with polished wood and mirrors. Beautiful. Suffocating. She'd noticed on her first week. No cameras there. Now that detail turned to dread. "Please," she said, trying to plant her feet on the slick marble floor. "I'll fix the bill. Too late." Greg yanked her forward. "You want to play hero? Let me teach you about hierarchy." Then, a voice from behind them, calm as winter steel. "Let her go." Everything stopped. The restaurant's hum collapsed into silence. Even the jazz seemed to die mid-note. Emily turned. A tall man had stepped out of the mirrored private suite near the bar. He wore a charcoal suit that caught the light like water, dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His presence filled the room without raising a word. Greg's grip slackened immediately. "Mr. Morello, I didn't realize you were—" "I said," the man repeated softly, "let her go." Greg dropped his hand as if burned. Emily stumbled back, her arm throbbing, heart hammering so hard she thought the chandeliers could hear it. Vincent Morello's gaze rested on her for just a second, enough for her to feel both seen and measured. His eyes were dark, deliberate, as if he'd already read her entire life and found the ending unsatisfying. "You're finished for tonight," he said quietly, but not to her. His tone was command, not conversation. "Michael, escort Mr. Torres to the office. No one leaves until I say." 2 men in black suits appeared from nowhere, security she hadn't realized existed, and flanked Greg. "Mr. Morello, please, it was a misunderstanding." "I'll decide what it was," Vincent interrupted. Then, turning to Emily, "Go home." She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, to thank him. She wasn't sure. But his gaze silenced her. Not cruelly, but completely. Moments later, she found herself outside in the October rain, the golden windows of the Halcyon glowing behind her like another world. Her reflection in the glass looked small, ghost-like. She pressed a trembling hand to her arm where Greg had grabbed her. Through the dripping city haze, she saw him, the man from the mirror, standing at the upstairs window, watching her leave. Inside, power rearranged itself around his silence. Outside, the girl who said, "That's theft, sir," walked into the night, unaware she had just lit the first match in a fire that would consume them all. He didn't save her out of mercy. He saved her because truth, once spoken in a room of liars, becomes a weapon, and he wanted to know who had just loaded it. Vincent Morello stood by the tinted glass of his private suite long after the waitress had gone. Rain streaked the window like veins of mercury, blurring the city below into smears of gold and smoke. Behind him, the Halcyon was quiet now, customers gone, staff whispering in uneasy tones, the air thick with the aftertaste of fear. He adjusted his cufflinks, silver against the charcoal sleeve, and said without turning, "Michael." "Yes, sir." The voice came from near the door. Michael Russo, his consigliere, had been waiting in the shadows like a statue carved out of obedience. "Get me every transaction from the last 6 months," Vincent said. "Cross-check receipts, wine inventory, and tip logs. I want Torres's prints on every lie he sold me." Michael hesitated. "That's a lot of data, sir. You expecting to find something specific?" Vincent finally turned. His eyes were dark, calm, and cold enough to make truth uncomfortable. "I already did," he said softly. "I saw it walk past me in a white shirt." At that moment, Emily Carter sat in her tiny apartment 6 blocks away, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her arm still ached where Greg had grabbed her. A faint bruise was forming, ugly proof that honesty always left a mark. She replayed the scene in her head, the voice, the authority in it, the way the entire room had frozen. Let her go. She didn't know who he was, only that everyone else did. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Carter," a man's voice said, deep, controlled. "This is Mr. Russo from the Halcyon. Mr. Morello would like to see you tomorrow. Noon sharp." Her breath caught. "Am I being fired?" A pause, then, "You're being remembered." The line went dead. By the time dawn painted the city in dull silver, the Halcyon had become a different animal. Vincent sat in his office overlooking the empty dining floor, a cup of untouched espresso steaming on the desk. The first audit reports glowed on his tablet. Hundreds of small manipulations. Greg Torres had been bleeding the restaurant slowly, invisibly, with surgical precision. Wine substitutions, overcharges, disappearing tips. Vincent exhaled, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. 6 months. 6 months of theft right under his nose, and no one said a word. No one, except her. Michael entered quietly. "Preliminary analysis is in. Torres and 2 others rerouted cash payments. Some employees might be complicit. You want me to start with HR?" "No." Vincent looked up. "Start with her." "Emily Carter?" "She noticed what I didn't. That makes her more dangerous than him." Michael raised an eyebrow. "To who, sir?" Vincent smiled faintly. To everyone who thinks I can't see. At noon, Emily walked into the Halcyon again, her black shoes squeaking against marble. The hostess avoided her eyes. The servers whispered. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mr. Russo met her by the bar and led her up a private staircase she'd never noticed before. Carpeted, soundless. At the top, a heavy oak door opened into an office that didn't belong to any restaurant she knew. Leather, mahogany, a grand piano in the corner. It smelled of smoke and old power. Vincent Morello was standing by the window, reading a file. He didn't look up right away, which somehow made her feel smaller. "Sit," he said eventually. Emily perched on the edge of the chair, hands clasped tight. I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean to cause trouble, I just—" "You told the truth," Vincent interrupted, finally looking at her. "That's all you did." "Yes, but—" He closed the file. "And yet everyone else lied, for months, including people who've been here longer than you've been alive." Emily blinked, unsure how to answer. Vincent watched her the way a man studies a chessboard before the final move. "Do you always keep records of things you notice, Miss Carter?" Her heart skipped. "Records?" He nodded toward her worn leather notebook sitting on his desk. Her notebook. Michael must have found it in her locker. "You write down every table, every bill, every inconsistency," Vincent said. "Very meticulous. That's not ordinary behavior for a waitress." She began, then stopped. "My brother's a nursing student. I helped him study accounting. I guess I notice patterns." "Patterns." Vincent repeated the word like it was precious metal. "Good. Because I need someone who sees what others miss." Her brows furrowed. "You mean—" "I mean," he said, stepping closer. "You're not fired. You're being promoted." Emily's mouth parted in shock. "Promoted? To what?" "To an assignment that doesn't exist," he said. "Not on paper, not yet. I want you back on the floor, same station, same uniform. But this time you're not serving wine." She frowned. "Then what am I doing?" Vincent's gaze hardened. "You're serving truth." Outside, the rain had stopped. But above the marble floors of the Halcyon, something darker had started moving, quietly, precisely, like a storm forming under glass. And in the reflection of that glass, Vincent Morello watched the girl who said, "That's theft, sir," take her seat back among the liars, and smiled. Because for the first time in years, the house was about to be clean. Every empire falls the same way. Not from the enemy outside, but from the notebook of the one honest soul within. For the first time since she started at the Halcyon, Emily Carter walked in not as a servant, but as a secret. Her black apron was the same, her hair pinned back the same, her smile rehearsed. But beneath the quiet rhythm of trays and wine glasses, something had shifted. She was no longer invisible. She was watching. Vincent Morello had given her a single instruction before she left his office the day before. Observe, don't accuse, write everything down. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Every face now looked like a mask, every compliment like bait. The air was thick with suspicion only she could smell. That evening, as the dinner rush began, Greg Torres returned. He looked worn, the arrogance drained from his shoulders, but the fury still burning behind his grin. Rumor said Mr. Morello had suspended him, not fired him. That meant something worse. Greg was still inside the system, bleeding it quietly, hoping no one noticed. "Welcome back, sweetheart," he said, brushing past her. "Guess they didn't fire you after all. Maybe I was too hard on you." Emily forced a smile that didn't belong to her. Maybe. Good girl, he said, tapping her order pad. Just keep your head down. You'll survive this place. She nodded, but her pulse didn't. In her pocket was the same notebook Vincent had returned to her, the one he'd called meticulous. Its leather edges were frayed, pages ink-stained and trembling with the weight of weeks. She began a new page. October 17th. Table 12. Chateau Margaux, 2015 replaced with Merlot. Torres signed. Each note was a thread. Each thread would soon weave into a noose. Upstairs, Vincent Morello watched from behind mirrored glass, his office lights dimmed to match the shadows of the dining room. Michael Russo stood beside him, scrolling through reports on a tablet. She's writing again, Michael said. Exactly like before. Vincent's gaze was distant, calculating. Good. Let her build it. The truth doesn't need our protection. It needs proof. Michael hesitated. She's just a kid, Vin. You really want to put her in the middle of this? Vincent's jaw flexed. She put herself there the moment she spoke out. You don't unlight a match once it's burning. He turned away from the glass. Besides, I need to know who else burns with her. 3 days later, Emily sat alone in the break room, her notebook open to a growing list of anomalies. Numbers that didn't add up, wines swapped, receipts voided, then re-entered under different names. She was tracing a pattern when a voice interrupted. Working on your novel? It was Rosa, another server. Sharp-tongued, 30, loyal to Greg. Emily shut the notebook quickly. Just balancing tips. Rosa smirked. You're wasting your time. Nobody makes it here by being honest, honey. You either play along or you don't play at all. Emily forced a smile, but inside something cold stirred. Not fear this time, but understanding. This wasn't about one bad manager. It was a culture, a machine of silence. That night she stayed late after close, cleaning the bar alone. The others had left, the music stopped, and the chandeliers flickered like tired eyes. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small USB drive Vincent had slipped her that morning. When you've seen enough, he'd said, record it here. Her hands trembled slightly as she connected it to the register's port. Screens flickered. Access logs, receipts, shift adjustments. She copied everything. Dates, payments, names. Then she paused. A line item blinked on the screen. Private account. V. Morello. Expense approval. J. Hale. Her breath caught. Jonathan Hale. The billionaire real estate magnate. What was his name doing inside the Halcyon's finances? She stared, unease crawling through her chest. This was bigger than Torres, bigger than bad wine or missing cash. Something else, something structural, was being hidden beneath the marble floors. Footsteps echoed behind her. Emily froze, unplugged the drive, slid it into her apron. Still here? Greg's voice filled the silence, low and oily. I thought good girls went home early. I was just finishing the register, she said quickly, turning to face him. He stepped closer, eyes glinting. You know, Emily, people talk. They say Mr. Morello's got a new favorite, that he's protecting you for reasons. Her spine stiffened. That's not true. He smirked. Maybe, but it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what people believe, and right now, they believe you're the reason I'm under investigation. He leaned in until she could smell the whiskey on his breath. You're playing a dangerous game, little accountant. Then softly, and I always win dangerous games. He left her there, heartbeat wild, the hum of refrigerators filling the silence he'd poisoned. Emily's fingers gripped the notebook tighter. The ink smeared where her hand shook, but she wrote anyway. October 20th. Greg approached me after close. Feels threatened. This is bigger. Upstairs, Vincent watched the security feed. The cameras didn't capture sound, but they didn't need to. He saw Greg's shadow pass too close, saw Emily's hand tremble as she wrote. Michael entered quietly. The ledger? Vincent didn't look away. It's writing itself. By midnight, Emily left through the back door, rain starting again. Thin, silver, unrelenting. The city shimmered like a half-truth. She clutched her notebook under her coat, unaware that inside its worn pages lay the exact pattern that would expose not only Greg Torres, but also the secret deal between Vincent Morello and Jonathan Hale that could bring down both of their empires. He didn't invite her to an office. He invited her to a war disguised as an opportunity. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Halcyon, too bright for the secrets it hid. Emily arrived early. Too early. The way people do when they're afraid of being late to something they don't understand. Her heart still raced from the night before. The flash drive in her bag felt heavier than steel. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the line on the register screen again. Private account, V. Morello. Expense approval, J. Hale. She had copied it. She didn't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe survival. But now it pulsed in her thoughts like a second heartbeat. Michael Russo was waiting by the bar. His suit was gray today, not black. Less threatening, more corporate. But his eyes were the same, the kind that notice everything. "Mr. Morello's expecting you," he said. "Upstairs?" Emily followed him past the staircase, through a corridor lined with oil paintings of Italian coastlines. Romantic, expensive, unreal. Her shoes made no sound on the carpet. When she stepped into Vincent Morello's office, he was already standing by the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Morning mist softened the city's edges, turning skyscrapers into ghosts. "Sit down, Miss Carter," he said, voice steady as a metronome. Emily sat. Her hands clutched the strap of her bag so tightly her knuckles went white. Vincent turned slowly, eyes scanning her face like a lie detector. "You've been working hard," he said. "I've been reading your notes." "My notes?" Her throat tightened. You looked at them again?" He nodded. "That's what you do when you run a business. You look." He set a thin black folder on the desk. The top page was a printout of her handwriting, scanned perfectly. October 20th. Greg approached me after close. Feels threatened. This is bigger. Her pulse hammered. He knows. Vincent stepped closer. "You were right, you know. It is bigger. Much bigger than you think." Emily forced herself to meet his gaze. "I just wanted to do the right thing." "The right thing," he said softly, almost amused. "Do you even know what that is in this world?" She blinked. "Isn't it the truth?" Vincent's eyes darkened. "Truth without power is a beggar at the king's gate." He gestured to the chair across from her. "Let me show you what kind of gate you've been standing at." He opened the folder. Inside were transaction summaries, property contracts, wire transfers, lines of numbers marching like soldiers. "Jonathan Hale," Vincent said, "a billionaire who believes everything can be bought, including me." Emily frowned. "But why would he be in your restaurant's accounts?" "Because the Halcyon is more than a restaurant," Vincent said quietly. "It's a front, a legal face for investments, real estate, supply chains, logistics. Hale's been using my name to move money under federal radar. Greg Torres was his messenger." He patted bills, laundered tips, and built a trail that would lead back here, to me. Emily's blood ran cold. So Hale's framing you? Vincent nodded. With help from inside. And you want me to help prove it? He studied her. You're quick. I'm terrified. Good, he said. Fear keeps you sharp. He leaned forward, hands clasped. Here's the proposition, Miss Carter. You stay where you are. Keep writing. Keep seeing what others can't. Only this time, you report directly to me. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. As what? Vincent smiled faintly. As eyes, as ears, as the only person in this building who hasn't already sold their soul. Emily stared at him. Why me? Because you don't belong here, he said simply. And that makes you incorruptible. She shook her head. You think I can spy on them? I think you already have. He walked to the window again. Greg will test you. Hale will sniff around. You'll play the part of a scared little waitress who wants to keep her job. Meanwhile, I'll pull strings they don't know exist. What if they find out? She asked. Vincent turned back, voice a whisper. Then you'll have to trust that I meant it when I said let her go. Michael appeared at the door with a small black envelope. Sir, this just came from Hale's office. Vincent opened it. A note written in silver ink. Lunch tomorrow. Same table as before. Bring your mask. He folded it carefully. Tell Hale I'll be there. Then he looked at Emily. You're coming too. She blinked. Me? You wanted truth, Miss Carter. Tomorrow you'll see it. Dressed in a suit, sipping imported whiskey, pretending to be civilized. When she left the office, the hallway felt longer than before. Every step echoed like a countdown. Her reflection in the glass doors looked older, paler. A girl standing at the edge of something she couldn't name. Downstairs, the restaurant was opening for lunch. Greg Torres smiled at her from across the room, the kind of smile that promised violence in time. She smiled back, faintly. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because now she had a plan. Outside, the city gleamed with cruel beauty. And somewhere in a penthouse across the river, Jonathan Hale was already reading a report with her name on it. They told her to keep her head down, but sometimes survival means lifting your eyes just high enough to see who's watching from the dark. Emily Carter walked back into the halcyon as if returning to the scene of a crime. The same chandeliers glowed, the same violins sighed through hidden speakers, the same scent of truffle oil and money drifted through the air. But nothing felt the same. Because this time, she wasn't just a waitress. She was bait. Every whisper turned when she passed. Some voices fell to hush, others sharpened like knives. She could feel their stares, the kitchen boys, the senior servers, the bartenders who used to nod politely and now watched her like she'd joined another species. In a way, she had. Greg Torres was at the bar, pretending not to notice her. He poured himself a drink he wasn't supposed to, smiled without warmth, and called out, "Back from your field trip, sweetheart? Heard you had a private meeting upstairs." Emily's hands stilled over her tray. "Just back to work, sir." "Good," he said. "You do your job, and I'll do mine." Then, under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear, "Let's see how long you last." She said nothing. Silence was safer than truth. But silence also had teeth. Upstairs, behind the mirrored wall, Vincent Morello watched the floor. He'd told himself it was strategy, not concern, that she was a piece on the board, not the pulse in his conscience. But as he watched her move between tables, steady, focused, eyes down, He felt the unease of a man who had built an empire on fear and was now trusting it to a woman who still believed in decency. "Any sign of Hale?" he asked without turning. Michael Russo checked his watch. "His car just pulled up." 2 minutes. Vincent nodded. "Prep the suite, and make sure she sees him walk in." Michael hesitated. "You're using her as leverage, aren't you?" Vincent's tone was quiet, dangerous. "I'm using her as truth. The difference is that truth doesn't flinch." At precisely 12:03, Jonathan Hale entered. The billionaire was all polished charm and winter arrogance. Steel gray suit, sapphire tie, eyes the color of a knife. He moved through the restaurant like a man who thought gravity worked for him. "Vincent," he greeted, arms wide. "You never change. Still hiding your genius behind pasta and chandeliers." Vincent's smile was professional, detached. "And you still mistake manipulation for genius." They shook hands, slow, deliberate, like two men passing the same loaded gun back and forth. As they walked to the VIP suite, Emily stepped aside to clear their path. Hale's gaze flicked over her, dismissive, then doubled back. For a moment, recognition sparked. "You," he said. "The girl who made the news for calling out her manager." Emily froze. "Yes, sir." Hale smirked. "Good for you. We need more heroes who make accountants nervous." Vincent's jaw tightened. "She's one of my best employees." "Then maybe she should serve at my table today," Hale said casually, and kept walking. Vincent's silence was answer enough. Inside the private suite, champagne hissed softly as Hale poured himself a glass. "I have to admit, Vince, I'm impressed. You handled that little scandal beautifully. Fired no one, blamed no one, and somehow came out holier than the Pope. The press loved it." Vincent's smile didn't move his eyes. "You sound almost jealous." "Jealous?" Hale chuckled. "No, curious. You see, most men in our position would rather bury a body than a headline. You, though, you turned the body into branding." Vincent leaned back. "You came here for something. What is it?" Hale swirled the champagne, watching the bubbles rise like tiny lies. "Partnership renewal, or should I say, damage control. The feds are sniffing around some of our joint accounts. I need you calm and cooperative." "I don't cooperate," Vincent said softly. "I choose." "Then choose wisely," Hale replied. "Because if I go down, you go down with me, and so will your little waitress spy." The room went still. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Vincent's voice was a whisper of thunder. "What did you just say?" Hale smiled. "Oh, come on, you think I don't know? The cameras, the ledgers, the little girl scribbling notes like a paralegal. You've made her the face of your conscience. How poetic. How stupid." Downstairs, Emily was carrying a tray when her earpiece, hidden under a strand of hair, buzzed faintly. Michael's voice came through, calm but tight. "They're talking about you. Stay alert." Her pulse quickened. "What are they saying?" "Nothing you want to hear." She forced her hands to stay steady as she poured wine for a couple laughing at table 9. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to not be part of whatever storm was brewing upstairs. But she stayed. Because this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about finishing what she'd started. Upstairs, Hale stood, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "I'll make this simple, Vincent. Call off your little morality project. Fire the girl. Delete the files. Or next week, the Halcyon's books will be on the front page of the Tribune, and your name will be the headline." Vincent rose slowly. "And if I don't?" Hale smirked. "Then I remind you who financed your empire. Remember the wire transfers from Rome? The ones you called family money? I have the originals. One subpoena, and your lineage of saints becomes a ledger of criminals. For a heartbeat, Vincent said nothing. Then he smiled. That calm, terrifying smile of a man who'd already died once inside and found it liberating. "You're right," he said. "You do have the originals." He pressed a button on the table. The lights dimmed slightly, which means you won't notice what's missing. Hale frowned. "What the hell are you—" A new voice filled the room. Emily's voice. A recording played through the suite speakers. "October 20th. Greg approached me after close. Feels threatened. This is bigger." Followed by another. "Expense approval. J. Hale." Hale froze. Vincent's gaze was ice. "You think you're the only one who collects evidence?" Michael stepped in with a folder. "Backup copies, already sent to the feds." Vincent leaned forward. "You're not holding me hostage anymore, John. You're holding yourself." Outside the glass, Emily stood motionless, balancing a tray she no longer felt. Through the reflection, she saw Hale's face pale, saw Vincent's unflinching calm. For a fleeting second, she understood. This wasn't just business. It was penance. Vincent wasn't cleaning his empire. He was atoning for it. When Hale stormed out minutes later, his smile was gone. Vincent followed him to the doorway, murmured something Emily couldn't hear, and returned to his office. As he passed her, he stopped. "You did well," he said quietly. "Now we wait for the storm." Emily swallowed. "And if it hits us?" Vincent looked past her toward the city that glittered like a lie trying to stay beautiful. "Then we stand in it," he said. "That's how truth earns its name." Justice, in his world, was never about right or wrong. It was about who could stay standing when the smoke cleared. 3 days later, the city was humming with rumors. The Tribune had printed a quiet piece, just 2 paragraphs, about unexplained financial discrepancies linked to Jonathan Hale's conglomerate. It didn't name the Halcyon, but every insider in Chicago knew where the trail began. Inside the restaurant, the air had changed again. The laughter was thinner. The smiles rehearsed. Everyone sensed a shift in gravity but didn't know which way it was tilting. And at the center of that fragile calm was Emily Carter, wiping down tables with the patience of a saint and the paranoia of a spy. In Vincent Morello's office, a plan was forming. Michael Russo placed a thick folder on the desk. "The feds are circling Hale. We've got maybe a week before he figures out who handed them the data." Vincent didn't look up. "He already knows. Then he'll retaliate." "He'll try," Vincent said. "That's why we're going to give him what he wants, just not the way he expects." Michael frowned. "You're talking about bait." Vincent nodded toward the floor below. "Her." Michael exhaled. "She's not ready for that." "She's already in it, whether she knows it or not," Vincent said. "Greg's been reaching out to Hale again. We intercept one meeting, just one, and it all collapses." Downstairs, Greg Torres was pacing near the back exit, phone pressed to his ear. Emily caught fragments of his voice as she passed. "Thursday night, Meridian Tower, top floor, no cameras. He'll pay double." Her pulse quickened. Thursday night, Meridian Tower. She kept walking, pretending not to hear, but her mind was racing. Every instinct screamed to tell Vincent, but a smaller, braver voice whispered, "You can do this yourself." That night, she sat in her apartment with the rain tapping against the window like a warning. She pulled out the flash drive, the notebook, the list of dates and names. It all led back to one intersection of greed. Hale and Torres. If she could record one meeting between them, she could end it. She didn't know that upstairs in the Halcyon, Vincent was thinking the same thing. Thursday night. Meridian Tower. The building rose like a black monolith above the river, its glass walls reflecting the city lights like liquid fire. Emily arrived early, dressed in plain clothes, her hair tucked under a cap. She had a small recording device hidden inside a waiter's notebook, one of Vincent's old tricks. She slipped into the empty conference suite. The air smelled of disinfectant and money. She placed the device under the table lip, checked the light, blinking green, and waited in the shadows. 10 minutes later, voices. Greg entered first, nervous, tugging at his tie. Hale followed, smooth, amused, smelling of confidence and expensive guilt. "You brought the files?" Hale asked. Greg nodded, sliding a folder across the table. "Everything. Every transfer, every name. You leak this, Morello burns." Hale smiled. "Good man. Loyal when it matters." Greg exhaled shakily. "And my payment?" "On the chair behind you." Greg turned and froze. There was no briefcase, just a small red envelope. He opened it. Inside, a single card. "You're being recorded." The blood drained from his face. He spun around. Hale was gone. Instead, two men in dark suits stepped out from behind the frosted glass panels. Federal agents. "Greg Torres?" one said. "We'd like a word." Greg's voice cracked. What the hell is this?" Before he could run, they had him pinned against the table. The recorder light blinked steadily beneath it, capturing everything. The confession, the betrayal, the fear. From the far corner, a silhouette stepped forward. Vincent Morello. "Did you really think," Vincent said quietly, "that a man who built his fortune in shadows doesn't know how to work the dark?" Greg's breath came in ragged bursts. "You set me up." "No," Vincent said, stepping closer. "You set yourself up. I just provided the lighting." Down the hall, Emily stood behind a half-open door, watching. Her stomach turned at the sight, the calm efficiency of power devouring itself. When Vincent emerged minutes later, she met his eyes. "You used me," she said. "I protected you," he replied. "You didn't ask me." He stopped. "You wanted truth, didn't you? That's what it looks like. Ugly. Necessary." She shook her head. "No, that's not truth. That's control." Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or recognition. He turned away. "Control keeps people alive, Emily. You'll understand that one day." 2 hours later, the Tribune headline hit. "Restaurant manager arrested in federal sting operation. Billionaire Jonathan Hale implicated." By morning, the city was roaring. TV vans parked outside the Halcyon. Reporters swarmed the entrance. Microphones flashed like gunfire. Emily arrived to find the door locked, a single note taped to the glass. Closed for renewal. Behind the curtain, Vincent stood alone in the dim lobby. He watched the headlines scroll across the screen, then picked up his phone and called Michael. "It's done," he said. "Not yet," Michael replied. "Hale's on the move. He's heading to D.C., probably to make calls before the indictment drops." Vincent's eyes darkened. "Then we're not done until he's silent." That night, Emily sat on the riverwalk, her reflection trembling in the black water. She had helped bring down a billionaire, a criminal, a system of rot, and yet she felt nothing but hollow. Truth had won. But in the quiet between the headlines, she wondered if it had cost her soul to do it. Some truths don't set you free. They drag you into the light and leave you nowhere to hide. Morning came to Chicago with a kind of brightness that felt dishonest. Headlines screamed from every screen, "Billionaire Jonathan Hale under federal investigation." The Halcyon at the center of a money laundering scandal. The waitress who brought down a tycoon. Emily Carter's face, her photograph from the restaurant's staff page, was suddenly everywhere. The girl who said no had become the city's reluctant symbol of integrity, and she hated it. Every call from journalists. Every email offering interviews, book deals, sponsorships. They didn't want her truth. They wanted her story, a digestible fable, the poor waitress who caught the wolf. But she knew the wolf still breathed. He just had a better lawyer. In the dark heart of the Halcyon, the tables were covered with white sheets like shrouds. Vincent Morello stood in the center of the dining room, silent, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. Michael Russo entered quietly. Hale's lawyers filed a counterclaim, accusing you of data theft and entrapment. They say you orchestrated the sting to destroy him. Vincent's jaw tightened. He's desperate. Michael nodded. Desperate men burn cities. Vincent finally looked up. Then we'll rebuild after the fire. Outside, cameras gathered. Reporters stood beneath umbrellas, voices echoing. Do you confirm that the Halcyon acted as a financial front? Was Miss Carter your accomplice or your victim? Is Vincent Morello the real architect behind Hale's collapse? Emily pushed through the crowd, hoodie up, trying not to meet any eyes. Inside, the smell of lemon oil and dust made her heart ache. The restaurant was dead, but its ghosts weren't done with her. Vincent was waiting near the bar, still in the same suit he'd worn the night of the sting. You shouldn't be here, he said. Neither should you. He almost smiled. Touché. She stepped closer. They're saying I worked for you. You did, he said evenly. Not like that. I know. Then tell them. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. And what would that change? The story's already written. They just need a villain and a saint. Lucky for us, I can be both. She stared at him, anger trembling in her voice. I didn't do this for your redemption. No, he said softly. You did it because you believed truth meant freedom. And doesn't it? Vincent's eyes were cold and tired. No, Emily. It means exposure. Freedom is something you buy afterward. That night, the first broadcast aired. Clips of Emily serving tables, her photo beside Hale's, then surveillance footage, leaked, unauthorized, of her confrontation with Greg Torres in the hallway. The segment was titled, From Waitress to Weapon. They painted her as a pawn, a girl groomed by a powerful man to bring down his rival. Her phone exploded with hate. Gold digger, traitor, whore. The same city that had called her brave now wanted her silence. She called Vincent. He didn't answer. When she arrived at the Halcyon, the door was locked again. Through the glass, she saw him inside, alone, watching the same broadcast she had fled from. When he noticed her, he turned off the screen and came to the door. Why didn't you defend me? She demanded. He opened the door, letting the rain in with her. Because they wouldn't believe me. And if I spoke, they'd dig deeper. Into what? He hesitated. Then, into how much blood this place is built on. Her stomach tightened. You mean the Mafia stories? They're real? He said nothing, which was its own confession. So I was never helping you clean your name, she whispered. I was helping you bury your sins. Vincent's expression was unreadable. I told you truth has a cost. You just didn't ask who'd pay it. Outside, thunder rolled over the river. Inside, the power flickered, the chandeliers pulsing like fading hearts. Michael rushed in, a phone in hand. The feds are coming. Hale flipped. He's testifying tomorrow, naming you as co-conspirator. Vincent didn't move. Of course he is. Emily's voice was small but steady. Then stop running. Tell them everything. About him. About you. About this place. Vincent turned toward her slowly, eyes like stone polished by regret. And when they ask why a billionaire trusted a waitress with his downfall, what should I tell them? The truth, she said, that you needed someone who still believed it existed. For the first time, he laughed, not with joy, but surrender. Emily, he said quietly, you don't survive this city by being honest. You survive it by being useful. She stepped closer, rain dripping from her hair, eyes fierce. Then maybe it's time someone survived differently. Their gazes locked, two people standing on opposite sides of the same wound. Vincent's voice lowered to a whisper. You really think you can walk through fire and stay clean? Emily didn't blink. I think you forgot. Some of us were born in it. That night, as the storm broke, the police lights painted the restaurant in red and blue. Agents entered quietly, handcuffs gleaming. Vincent raised his hands without a word. As they led him out past Emily, he paused. Don't waste this, Miss Carter. They'll write whatever story you give them. Make sure it's one that burns. She watched as he disappeared into the night, rain falling like applause. The next morning, every network carried the footage. Vincent Morello arrested, the Halcyon seized. But one line in the Tribune stood out more than the rest. Source of initial evidence remains unknown. FBI confirms female witness under protection. Emily closed the paper, packed her notebook, and walked toward the bus station. The truth had burned everything, but she was still standing. And somewhere deep inside, under the ashes of reputation and ruin, she could feel it, a small, stubborn flicker of light that refused to die. They burned the house of lies to the ground. Now someone had to decide what to build from the ashes. 6 weeks later, the sign over the Halcyon was gone. The gold lettering had been scraped clean, the marble facade draped in scaffolding like bandages over a wounded body. Reporters had moved on to newer scandals. The city, as it always did, forgot. But Emily Carter hadn't. She walked past the empty restaurant every morning on her way to the courthouse, a paper cup of coffee in hand, the same notebook under her arm. Now filled not with numbers, but with names. Names of former staff, suppliers, waiters, cleaners. The people who had been left behind when truth detonated. The people who, like her, had told themselves they were just doing their jobs. Inside the courthouse, she sat quietly in the back as Vincent Morello faced the judge. His once perfect suit looked softer now, lived in. His hair had silvered. He didn't look like a king anymore. He looked like a man who'd finally met the mirror he'd been avoiding all his life. The prosecutor read charges: conspiracy, tax fraud, racketeering. Vincent didn't contest. He simply said, guilty. The word landed like a confession and a benediction at once. Emily's throat tightened. For weeks, she'd told herself she hated him. The manipulation, the coldness, the way he'd used her notebook as a blade. But sitting there, watching him surrender without excuse, she realized what she truly felt. Grief. Because for all his sins, Vincent had done something she hadn't yet learned to do. He'd stopped pretending. After the sentencing, Michael Russo found her outside on the courthouse steps. Rain again, because somehow every turning point in her life smelled like wet concrete. He asked me to give you this, Michael said, handing her a sealed envelope. She hesitated before taking it. What is it? Michael's eyes softened. Closure, maybe. He walked away before she could ask more. At home, she opened it slowly. Inside were 2 documents. The first, a legal transfer of ownership. Vincent Morello hereby grants Emily Carter 25% equity of the Halcyon Group. Below that, in his own hand, to the only person who ever told me the truth to my face. The second was a short letter. Emily, the world will always need places where truth can eat without choking. Build one. Call it whatever you want. Just make sure the mirrors are clear this time. VM. She sat for a long time staring at the paper, the rain blurring the ink where her tears fell. Weeks turned into months. Chicago thawed from winter. The scaffolding came down. Where the Halcyon once stood, a new sign appeared. The Glass House. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows with no tint, no shadow. Every wall was glass, every transaction transparent, literally. No hidden corners, no camera-blind hallways. Former staff returned one by one. Some out of loyalty, some out of curiosity, some out of guilt. They found Emily behind the bar, sleeves rolled, apron clean, her once nervous hands now steady. When a customer tried to leave a $100 tip, she smiled and pointed to the donation box labeled Employee Fund for those who stayed honest. The man frowned. You really think honesty pays? Emily smiled. Eventually, if you don't quit too early. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, she unlocked the private office upstairs, the one that used to belong to Vincent. Now it was bare except for one item on the shelf, a small framed quote he'd left behind. Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals. Carl Jung. She stared at it for a long time. Then she set her notebook on the desk, its last page still blank, and wrote, Day 1. The kitchen smells like basil and clean air. The mirrors are honest. The staff are tired but trying. Maybe this is what healing looks like. Not purity, but transparency. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. Through the glass, passers-by could see everything. Laughter, motion, small imperfections. And in the middle of it all, Emily, standing with her head high, no longer invisible. She wasn't the waitress who said no anymore. She was the woman who rebuilt what saying no destroyed. That night, she locked up the restaurant and stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the sign one last time. The Glass House. For the first time, the reflection staring back at her wasn't fragile or uncertain. It was whole. She whispered, Thank you, Vincent. Then turned toward the rain and walked home. Not into darkness, but into something far more dangerous, far more necessary. The light. Every revolution begins quietly, at a single table where someone dares to speak without permission. By spring, the Glass House was no longer just a restaurant. It had become something else entirely, a sanctuary disguised as a dining room. Journalists, law students, ex-employees from fallen corporations, they all came, not for the food, but for the freedom to talk. Emily Carter never advertised it. She didn't need to. Truth, once given a home, has its own way of spreading. Every evening she'd light the candles herself, small, warm flames flickering against glass walls, and listen. People came in with silence and left with conviction. It reminded her of confession, except no one needed forgiveness, just the courage to stop lying to themselves. One night, a young woman lingered after closing. She looked barely 20, with red-rimmed eyes and ink stains on her hands. You don't know me, she began softly, but I used to work for Hale's Foundation. When the news broke, I thought you were a liar. Now, I think you're the only reason any of us can breathe again. Emily smiled gently. I'm not a hero. The girl shook her head. No, your proof. She placed a small envelope on the counter and walked out. Inside was a handwritten list of names. Employees still trapped under Hale's shell companies, still silenced by NDAs. Emily folded the paper carefully. A familiar feeling returned, that pulse of purpose that once terrified her. She realized this was never about one restaurant or one man. It was about systems, about sunlight. And she wasn't done yet. Weeks later, the Glass House Foundation was born. It started as a scholarship for whistleblowers, people who had lost their jobs for telling the truth. Then it became legal aid, then a community fund. The name spread like rumor and redemption. The Carter Initiative. The press tried to crown her the saint of transparency. She refused interviews. Her only public statement was simple. If truth costs you everything, it's because you've been living on credit. But not everyone celebrated. One evening, as the staff prepared to close, a black car stopped outside. Two men in dark coats stepped out. They didn't order food. They just sat, watching her from a corner table, untouched water glasses reflecting candlelight. Emily approached them. "We're closing soon," she said. One of them smiled, too politely. "Miss Carter, you've built quite a movement." "Not a movement," she replied. "A mirror." He leaned forward. Mirrors are dangerous things in a world built on illusion. She met his gaze steadily. Then maybe it's time the world sees itself. They left without paying. She didn't ask them to. Later that night, she found a letter slipped under the door. No name, just a single line. "Be careful who you save. Some of them built the fire you're standing in." She read it twice, folded it, and placed it beside Vincent's old Jung quote. "Power doesn't corrupt, it reveals." And for the first time, she understood. Because the glass house wasn't just revealing corruption in the world, it was revealing her ambition, her exhaustion, her need to believe that goodness, if organized well enough, could be as powerful as greed. She looked out through the transparent walls, at her staff laughing, her guests debating, the city glittering beyond the glass, and whispered to herself, "Maybe truth isn't something you win. Maybe it's something you feed." That night, as she locked the doors, she caught her reflection in the glass once more. No longer the trembling waitress, no longer the weapon, but a woman who had built an altar out of ruin and invited the city to eat in peace. Sometimes the ghosts we bury come back not to haunt us, but to hand us what we couldn't carry before. The letter arrived on a Thursday. No return address, no sender. Just a postmark from Leavenworth Federal Prison and a name written in Vincent Morello's sharp, unmistakable handwriting. Emily sat at her desk inside the glass house, staring at it for a long time before touching it. It had been a year since the trial. A year since she'd watched him disappear behind steel doors and fluorescent lights. A year since she'd tried to convince herself that the story was finished. But the truth has a strange aftertaste. It lingers. She opened it carefully, as if afraid the paper might bleed. "Emily, if you're reading this, the world has already forgotten both of us." "That's good. It means you're free to start again, without my name in your shadow. I've had time to think here. Prison does that. It strips everything unnecessary, money, noise, pride, until all that's left is the architecture of your soul. You were right, you know. Truth isn't control. It's surrender. It's the art of losing beautifully. I never told you this, but when I first saw you at that table, arguing over a forged receipt, I saw myself 20 years ago, before I learned how to lie for a living. You reminded me what it looked like to be clean. Don't let this city turn you into what it turned me into. Keep your mirrors clear. If there's still a glass house standing, then maybe the world isn't lost yet. Vincent. The words didn't feel like forgiveness. They felt like inheritance. Emily sat in silence for a long while, the hum of the restaurant faint beyond the office door. Outside, the staff laughed, glasses clinking. Life had gone on. She had built something that worked, something good. But now, the letter felt like a key, one that opened a door she hadn't realized she'd closed. She turned it over. Something was written on the back, faint, almost hidden. Go to the mirror. At first, she thought it was metaphor, but something inside her whispered no. That night, after closing, she went upstairs to Vincent's old office, the one she'd kept empty out of superstition or respect. She wasn't sure. The quote still hung on the wall. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals. She ran her fingers along the mirror behind the desk. The surface was cold, seamless. Then her hand caught a small notch along the frame. A compartment clicked open. Inside, a black envelope. Her breath caught. She opened it and froze. Documents, bank records, letters, all in Vincent's handwriting, all addressed to federal investigators, dated weeks before his arrest. He hadn't fallen because she exposed him. He'd fallen because he had already started exposing himself. He hadn't used her as a pawn. He'd used himself as a shield. Emily sank into the chair, heart pounding. He'd planned everything. Not to survive, but to leave something clean behind. The sting, the evidence, the trial, all of it had been a carefully orchestrated confession. And now, the full weight of that truth pressed against her chest. He hadn't saved himself. He'd saved her. The next morning, she stood before her staff during prep hour. The sunlight cut through the glass walls like liquid gold, painting everyone in the same light. No hierarchy. No secrets. I used to think the glass house was built to expose lies, she said softly. But maybe it's here to remind us that redemption isn't about what we destroy. It's about what we choose to rebuild. She placed Vincent's letter in a small glass frame by the door. Below it, she engraved 3 words: Keep your mirrors clear. That night, as she closed up alone, she looked out through the transparent walls at the city beyond, its towers gleaming, its shadows honest for once. And in her reflection, she thought she saw him, standing beside her in silence, not haunting, not watching, just there, like an echo of something finally understood. Good night, Vincent, she whispered. The lights dimmed, the rain began, and the glass reflected only her, not as she was, but as she'd become. The woman who walked through fire and kept walking. Months later, the Glass House Foundation expanded beyond Chicago, a network of transparency initiatives across the country. Journalists, whistleblowers, and young idealists found refuge there. And every new branch bore the same words carved into its entrance: Keep your mirrors clear. Because that's what Vincent had given her, not absolution, but a reflection that could finally bear the weight of the truth.